My name is Captain Jacqueline Shoemaker. I have been here for about a year on base, but I've been in healthcare for nearly 20 years. And I tell you that because I want you to know a little bit about my background. If you can think of the department in the hospital, I've worked there. From ICU to ER, really just all over. And I really had the opportunity to see patients who were really struggling, really some on the brink of death, and very sad. And you think it's wonderful to be able to help people in such a critical time in their life, but you think, I want to do something more. How do I have the opportunity to help them and prevent them from maybe being in the hospital, prevent them from the ER, prevent them from the ICU? So you think, what can I do? And so I went on and became a nurse practitioner. I'm working family medicine, and now I'm seeing patients on a regular basis. I'm really getting to know the patients, and I'm giving them this wonderful advice, and I see their weight begin to creep up. Their diabetes get worse, their high blood pressure get worse, and I just write another prescription and another prescription and another prescription, and no one's health seems to significantly improve. So in healthcare, we're quick to say, well, that patient is non-compliant. They're not following the advice I gave, because of course my advice was brilliant. But really, I was really getting to know my patients, so I knew that wasn't the case. I knew Becky or Susie or Tommy, they were telling me the truth. They were following the advice I was giving, so maybe there's something wrong with the advice that I was giving. And it led me to research. Research that's not widely talked about, but it is there and it's abundant. And this research can help heal disease through food. So today, folks, I want to challenge you, have a sugar-free challenge for the base, right? How can we heal disease through food? How can we heal the body? How can we be sugar-free for a couple of months? Can we do that into May? And I want to hear some stories in May. I want to hear some success stories and how you have more energy, how aches and pains are gone, how you have better digestion, you're sleeping better, you're optimizing your performance with your PT test and in life in general. So if you don't mind advancing the slide there, some little objectives. We're going to go over a little bit of history of nutrition because I think it's important to understand where we were and how we got to where we are. Discuss the relationship of insulin and weight gain, and explain nutritional ketosis and its practical application. Go ahead. So I'm a member of the Obesity Medical Association, the World Obesity Federation, the American Society of Obesity Physicians, and some other organizations that aren't up there. But the Department of Defense uses this for the Navy SEALs, and forgive me, that it should all be capitals. A similar plan is also taught at Fit Camp. I'm one of the Fit Camp nutrition instructors, and we go out. We're actually going out at the end of this month, and we're going to teach this plan along with some other tools and techniques out at Fit Camp. So this plan is also taught at Duke for roughly $10,000. That's expensive, but people pay it because you walk away cured of your disease. It's used at the Cleveland Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic is using this to cure glioblastomas, which is also known as brain tumors. Go ahead. 70% of us struggle with weight. Maybe it's 5 pounds, maybe it's 50 pounds, it doesn't matter. And you think, when you were children and you sat in a classroom full of 10 people, did 7 out of the 10 people struggle? Maybe, probably not. You take those same folks, somebody's dealing with weight or health or aches and pains or digestive issues, or I'm just tired, I'm just old. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe we're a product of what we've been eating. So go ahead, please. So just some basic statistics. In the 1980s, this is a map of the folks, and you can see the 10% to the 15%, this is a little bit harder to read, that struggled with weight. At the time, Virginia didn't report any data, but West Virginia, you can see, was in the 15 to nearly 19%. Just 2015, and again, we don't have the most recent data. Look at West Virginia. 30 to 35.9% are struggling with weight. And you can see, again, how it's sort of overcome the country. We've nearly tripled the rates in this country in the past, since the 80s to present 2000s. What's going on? Something's going on, because you go to other countries and this isn't the case. Next slide. Up until about 150 years ago, sugar wasn't in the regular diet. Okay, when you look back to our Paleolithic ancestors, it was something they would stumble across once or twice a year. Many, many cultures have survived as the hunter-gatherers, and they've really done well. And we've really only been eating these refined grains for about 100 years. Not a very long time at all. Next slide. throughout history, obesity has really been rare. And one of my favorites is this Banting. So there's some debate in the literature if he's actually a doctor, or maybe just a doctor of other sorts. He was really a mortician. And he was processing these bodies, and he's like, you know, what's going on? He himself had gained 50 pounds. And so he went to the French, and he's like, what are you guys doing? Why are you so thin, and why do you not have any heart disease? And they said, you know what? We like butter and cream, and you should give up sugars and starches, though we may have them here in France. Those are treats and used rarely. So he wrote this very famous paper, Letter of Corpulence. You can Google it today. It's a great letter. Many countries all over the world banned. And you'll see banned in South Africa and parts of South Korea. You'll see it in Sweden, so much so that Sweden in 2016 ran out of butter. People were being arrested for smuggling butter into the country. We might have a drug problem. They've got a butter problem. I mean, it could be worse, right? So Bant or Banting is really popular in South Africa. They even have Banting aisles down the grocery store, Banting cookbooks, Banting restaurants. And there's actually a whole team coming from South Africa to talk about this March 24th in Winchester, Virginia at Shenandoah University. It's called the Adapt Your Life Company. You can look for that event on Eventbrite. So check that out. So that'll be kind of neat. But basically, he lost 50 pounds eliminating bread, milk, sweets. 1920 through 1950, it was actually standard medical advice. So if someone developed diabetes, we didn't have a national nutrition plan, but if someone developed diabetes, we're just going to cut sugar and starch. Get it out of the diet. And we would resolve the diabetes. It was actually in medical textbooks. It was known as the cure for diabetes, type 2 that is. And then somewhere along the line, there's some World War II and some other stuff that we don't have time politically to get into, and things really changed. Next slide. Heart disease, pre-war, was really non-existent. And then suddenly, a 700% increase. 700%? Wow. Our own President Roosevelt had 6 heart attacks in the White House. We like to believe he sat in his wheelchair for his polio, right? But it was really, he kept having a heart attack and having a heart attack and having it. Each time he had a heart attack, what did we do? We restricted his fat. Then he'd have another. Restrict his fat, he'd have another. You think when you get to the 5th or 6th heart attack, folks, that's not working. Maybe we need to look at something else. During this time, and even in mental institutions, you can see the bread and sugar rations. The psychiatric health significantly improved during the rations. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder went away. Is that wild? There's actually a physician at Harvard now working with schizophrenia and bipolar patients and resolving them of their symptoms and getting them off their medication. So, post-war, bread and sugars available and abundant. TV dinners, processed foods. McDonald's opened their door in 1947. Then tobacco. What we forget is in 1913, the federal government broke up the tobacco trusts. R.J. Reynolds, Campbell's came out of that. They said, you know what we're going to do? We've got to make this stuff tasty. We're going to flue cure it, flue curing the leaves, changing the sugar content from 5% to 20%, really increasing the sugar. Then we need to also enhance the nicotine. And how do you do that? We're going to blend it with the chew tobacco. And how is chew tobacco prepped? It's soaked in molasses and maple syrup. For flavor, right? So now you blend all that together and put that in the cigarette, changes the alkalinity. It can be inhaled more deeply into the lungs. You won't cough. And unfortunately, that happened in 1913. 1915, you have your first case of lung cancer. Sugar has killed more people than cigarettes. And some statistics say sugar has killed more people than war. We need to really evaluate how we fuel our bodies. Nutrition guidelines have changed in all these textbooks, and we've lost a lot of information. I love this one here. Paradigm shifts take a long time to change. Doctors would recommend cigarettes. They would smoke in the halls next to the oxygen tanks, okay? And if you wanted a tiny baby, if you were pregnant, we would encourage you to smoke a couple cigarettes a day. We don't want a big baby. Can you imagine a physician telling you that now? That sounds crazy, right? But those are things that were said, or a way to relax, or to have a good time. It was always encouraged. It was given to toddlers. I used to work in the hospital with 80 and 90-year-olds, and I'd be, sir, when did you start smoking? He's like, when I was 4. I mean, can you imagine seeing 4-year-olds running around with cigarettes today? So next slide there. There's lots of confusing things out there. So we hear, eat eggs, don't eat eggs. Eat butter, don't eat butter. Eat this, eat that. And we're so confused. And we've got all these little, from Jenny Craig to Weight Watchers to all these different companies and themes and ideas, and we're so confused. I'm going to be a vegan, I'm going to be a vegetarian, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And again, we're all looking for the information, and we're struggling. So even in the 80s, we were condemning all this stuff. And then in 2014, we're saying it's okay. And even the American Heart Association, which, by the way, we're the only country in the world to have such an organization that accepts trillions of dollars to endorse certain foods, and they accept that money from certain food groups. But they've even said, hey, eating fat doesn't raise your cholesterol. Go ahead. Some of that fat talk comes from Ancel Keys. He was an interesting fella. They found him studying bat poop in a cave, 3 months in the dark. And they said, sir, you're going to be perfect to study fat and tell the American people how bad it is. And if you actually pull his research and pull his data, he was force-feeding people fat and their cholesterol never elevated. Well, that wasn't good enough. So what they did after the war, they've collected research. And this collection of research, there were 22 countries that submitted the data. Well, again, he didn't like that data. He was being paid to prove fat's bad. So what are we going to do? We're going to cherry pick the data from 6 countries. Because that's a good way to do a research study, right? So he failed, to factor in cigarette smoking, the food changes, so many different things. He just simply looked at these people ate fat, so that must be the cause. And that's inappropriate. There was never a randomized controlled trial. With anybody who's research-based knows that that is really essential into understanding anything with science, is you have to have a replicated study. There needs to be randomized controlled trials, and again, that never happened. So then we jump ahead to the 70s, and this U.S. Senate committee got together. Senator George McGovern was behind it. Nixon was running for president, and they said, you know what? In 8 hours, they made up the food pyramid. 8 hours. The food pyramid was made up, incepted in 1980, and then by mid-2000s, data collection folks had come out and said, you know what, we made a mistake. We've now tripled heart disease, tripled diabetes, high blood pressure, weight, and made cancer worse in this country. Well, the smart thing to do would be a research study, right? No, we're just going to rearrange the food, my healthy plate now. American fat consumption then dropped from 55 to 60% to barely 30%, and we're condemning it. We're condemning the wrong food source. Go ahead, please. So I want to explain this a little bit. We've all heard about macronutrients and what they mean. Everything that we eat is either a protein, a carbohydrate, or a fat. And we often want to equate calories as equal. Some of you have heard me share this before. Let's say you have a gallon of gasoline and a gallon of motor oil. They can be equally measured, right? But they're burned differently, used differently, stored differently, so they're not the same thing. So the same could go for a calorie. I could have a calorie of fat, a calorie of carb, a calorie of protein. But on the molecular level, in the mitochondria of your cells and the way that they're used, they're burned differently, used differently, stored differently. So how many calories you have cannot just be calories. It needs to be the ratio. What percentage of your day is protein? What percentage of your day is carb? What percentage of your day is fat? Because just because we measured it all gram for gram for gram, yes, it took more calories to get there, it doesn't automatically make it bad. If you were measuring a ton of bricks and a ton of feathers, it might take more feathers to get there, but it doesn't make it bad. It's the difference of burning a log in a fire and burning the paper. Who's going to make more money if you're eating every hour, every 2 hours, versus once a day, twice a day? Think about the Native Americans. Think about ancient cultures, the hunters, the gatherers. They didn't walk around with 100-calorie snack packs, right? Listen to your body, and you may know yourself, like if I have a hearty breakfast, a couple of eggs and cooked in butter, I might feel really full. Versus the day I had a bowl of cereal, an hour later I'm starving and I need a granola bar, and then I need a cup of yogurt, and then I need this and I need that, and I'm having to eat every couple hours, and I have 4 breakfasts before I even get to lunch. So go ahead. Calories versus sugar. Again, they aren't equal, because if they truly were equal, everybody who ever had a gastric bypass to make their stomach this tiny would be this big around. It's the quality of what you put in, not so much the quantity. There's this thing called the glycemic index. So IV sugar is 100. That's as sweet as something is. And then you have whole wheat, white bread, Snickers, Splenda, sugar. On this list here, the next item next to the IV sugar is Splenda. It's an 80 on the glycemic index. Whole wheat, 72. Sugar, 70. White bread, 61. A Snickers is a 41. So 2 slices of whole wheat bread can raise your blood sugar more than a Snickers candy bar. Wow, right? What we don't realize, and I'm not advocating white, it's just mostly artificial products that doesn't raise the blood sugar as much, is there's now 25,000 different seeds of wheat. Most have never been tested for safety. Wheat in other countries, and it used to be here in the United States, would grow to be 6 feet tall in 6 months. We're Americans. We don't have time for that. 6 inches, 6 weeks. Antibiotics, steroid, hormoned up, accelerated to shrink the stalk and produce the seeds. And then we need it quickly, so we're going to drown the fields in glyphosate, also known as Roundup. So the Roundup is now in all these products. And wheat is a subsidy. You can get a tax break for putting wheat in your product. So now where do you find wheat? Your shampoo, your mouthwash, your toothpaste, your deodorant, your chapstick, condiments in your refrigerator, to the drinks that we drink, to the vitamins, the herbs. And you know the drug companies want in on this, so every prescription pill dipped in whole wheat. If it has to be shipped to other countries, many countries forbid that practice, so it's only a coating on the outside. So you can ask your pharmacist which tablets have been dipped. So how does all this abundance, antibiotics and hormones and steroids affect you? How does the Roundup affect you? Well, we really don't know, but we do know there's class action lawsuits against the Roundup companies right now. So next slide, please. Up until about 2000, in 2000, according to the USDA, we would consume 150 pounds of sugar. 150 pounds of sugar a year, that's a lot of sugar. 38% of the average person's diet would come from sugar. Either glucose, fructose, or something in between. Sugar is the #1 driver of diabetes and obesity and fatigue, which is not up there. Go ahead. So this is my favorite diagram. Many of you may have seen this already. It's from my own brain. So when we eat, or even when we're stressed, our blood sugar goes up. Then insulin is secreted. Insulin's job is to drop your blood sugar. Then right here, this is where we're tired and we're hungry or we're worn out and we think, I need a soda, I need a coffee, and it's Starbucks, a pick-me-up, a snack, a piece of chocolate. Up we go, then we crash again. Up we go and we crash. And we just end up on this roller coaster of life saying, I'm just tired all the time, I'm worn out, I'm just getting older. Maybe we have too much insulin. So your body's only allowed 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of sugar in your bloodstream at any given time. It's about this much. It's not a whole lot. So when you draw your blood, that's at 60 to 100, right? So pretend this is, a cell, and these little keys are insulin. Insulin opens the door to the cell, allows these sugar molecules into the cell. But on the American diet, the cell's full, the cell's saturated, there's no room in the end, the door goes closed. Uh-oh, we still have sugar molecules out here because we're on the American diet. So our body says we've got a plan, right? It's going to make more keys and more keys and more keys and more and more and more and more. And will an abundance of keys open a locked door? Absolutely not. But that's where we hear those words, you're insulin resistant. Your insulin's not working properly. maybe the insulin's working just fine. We're not addressing the other issue here. So the body's going to round up this insulin, it's going to take it over here to your liver, and it's going to repackage it. You're now going to get fatty liver, elevated cholesterol, or you're going to store fat on your tummy, waist, hips, and thighs if you're ladies. So depending on genetics, you may get fat storage outwardly. Some people maybe only get it around their heart and their arteries. Some people only get it around their liver. Some people get all those things. That's a genetic thing on which comes first. But generally, if you're suffering from fatty liver, elevated cholesterol, or weight, or even fatigue, it could simply just be an insulin issue. So then that's, how do we fix that, right? So, next slide, please. A chronic elevation of a half a teaspoon of sugar, which really isn't a lot, puts you at risk for diabetes. Half a teaspoon. Next slide, please. So when insulin's secreted or chronically elevated, fat will accumulate. When insulin levels drop, fat escapes and you'll be weight loss, and you can use fat as energy. We secrete insulin primarily in the response to the carbohydrates in our diet. Insulin is here to make you tired. Insulin's here to make you hungry. Insulin, the next slide, is the devil. He's not nice. Don't invite him over. You keep him away by limiting your carbohydrates. Okay? What triggers this insulin? Refined carbohydrates, grains, and sugars. Carbs block your satiety, so that's why you never feel full. We constantly feel hungry or tired. That frequent snacks and meals is not necessary if you're living on fat. Cortisol, stress. Nobody has stress, right? We're all stress-free in this room. Rainbows and sunshines and sparkles and unicorns for us all, right? Lack of sleep. This is where the exercise comes in. Help run off some of that cortisol. Artificial sugars. Yes, some artificial sugars can stimulate your blood sugar to elevate and create an insulin response. For some type 2 diabetics, they really see that blood sugar rise. If you're not a diabetic, you don't always see your blood sugar rise with these artificial sugars. But insulin always comes out with them, so be mindful. There are some better options. Stevia and Truvia are ones that we tend to like that tend to be more favorable. Protein. Many people don't realize that protein on a molecular level has to be turned into sugar first. So if everybody's doing protein bars and protein shakes and protein drinks and all these protein things, they can turn into sugar. So be mindful. It's not about an excessive or an abundance of protein either. So protein can turn into sugar. It doesn't always raise blood sugar, but it can turn into sugar and stimulate insulin. So that next slide. In case you didn't know, here's some 60+ names for sugar. I mean, just really wild names. I mean, some of your basic things like corn syrup. I mean, who would have thought that your pickle jar, you should read the label, in a jar of pickles? So most of them are sitting and soaked in corn syrup. Baby formula, once considered sacred, the first or second ingredient is corn syrup. And we wonder why 40% of our children are struggling with weight. So, all corn is candy, in case someone didn't know. Corn should be about this tall and have 7 or 8 seeds and be, you know, kind of as big as my pinky or a dime here. This is what we see outside. Very tall, multiple ears, hundreds of kernels. When this grows, you can't plant that. That won't regrow because it's not real. It goes in and comes out whole. You get nothing from it. Not one vitamin, not one nutrient. The only thing you get from this is sugar. So it needs to be looked at as a dessert. So I know we live in corn country, so think of that. Next slide. Banana. This is dessert right here. This is a real banana. How many of these have you seen? You crack it open and hundreds of seeds fall to the ground like a pomegranate, huh? Other cultures eat the skin, the seeds, the rind, everything. In America, we breed out all the seeds and make it really large and really sweet. What we need to be aware of is everything's been fooled with. Your fruit's been fooled with, your vegetables been fooled with, your grains have been fooled with, your meats have been fooled with, and what would be ideal is that you like live in some bubble and never leave and grow everything yourself, but that's not going to happen. So you have to make the best decisions as possible and be aware that some things, just because they say it's natural, may not be. Next slide. Sugar makes us happy, and we feel good, right? Dopamine and serotonin, things like that, these pleasure centers are rewarded. So much so that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. It can light up the brain like cocaine. I think we might have a slide coming up to show you that. And they're actually using, I don't know if any of you have heard of Narcan. They use Narcan for opiate addicts, and for the first responders are seeing someone that may have overdosed. They're using Narcan to wake them up from their opiate overdose. They're actually using Narcan for sugar addiction now. Isn't that wild? Something you use for narcotics, we're now using for sugar. And they've used cocaine-addicted rats, and we're able to get them off their cocaine just by giving them sugar water. It's kind of wild, too. Lots of triggers, you know. Stress, we want sugar, helping us cope. So oftentimes we don't eat because we're hungry, we eat because we're stressed, and that chocolate brownie's sitting right there, or that cupcake, or that cookie, or the hot blinky sign for the, what is that, Krispy Kreme donuts is on, right? The fleeting high pleasure and the fixation won't fix what's going on, so go ahead. So these repeated exposures, our brain really does get hijacked. It can physically alter the neural structure of your brain. The neurologically toxic fixes can quickly exhaust and wipe out your dopamine receptors, so you need more the next time, and more. So your brain is hijacked. Next slide. This is one of my pictures. I love this one. This is your normal brain. This is a brain on cocaine. It's a brain on sugar. And really, very similar. So we have a population that's in a constant state of withdrawal and craving and relapse. So could we be sugar-free for the next 8 weeks? Is that possible? Sugar acts on those same neurotransmitters as alcohol, morphine, and heroin. It is an addictive substance. So go ahead. So what we recommend, possibly, is the composition of breast milk. If it's safe for a baby, it's safe for you, right? 70% of your day being fat, 25% protein, 5% carbs. So what would a typical day look like then? Maybe you have a couple of eggs for breakfast. Maybe you have grilled chicken and a salad for lunch with some avocados and olives or olive oil, some fats on there. And dinner, maybe you eat a meat and a vegetable. It's really not that wild or crazy. And if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, see me after. I'll give you specific details on what to do. But it's really about enjoying the fat, and the fat's really what can fill you up and keep you full. And if you remember last month's lecture, we talked a little bit about fasting and how to play with that for optimizing performance. All right, next slide. I think I was at some little restaurant. I did this. I had asked for a BLT. There you go. Here's my lettuce and my bacon, and there's tomato and onion in there. And then they gave me a poached egg on the side. It was a nice lunch. It's in San Francisco or San Diego, one of those places. So it has many names: lower carb, high fat, modified Mediterranean, Banting, ketosis. I don't like to be big on labels, but it's about cutting sugars and starches, fake man-made food that you derive very little nutritional value from. What would be great is to know that, yes, there's weddings, there's birthdays, there's holidays, there's guard weekend, or maybe we're off plan. But 99% of the time you say, you know, I can do what I need to do to best fuel my body. You're going to feel better. You're going to sleep better. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have better digestion. You want to have fat as your main fuel source. So many health benefits: weight loss, fat loss, energy, diabetes management. We can improve your HDL and triglycerides. We can lower blood pressure. They're using it in various cancer therapies, epilepsy management. This is what the SEALs were struggling with. They were all seizing underwater, and they knew, like, okay, all the SEALs don't have epilepsy. What's going on? Well, with the pressure changes and deprived oxygen, they started to seize. So what has really changed other than the American diet? So if we can alter the American diet, put their macros at 70% fat, take that sugar away from the brain, and it will resolve the issue. So even this is used in many hospitals, including Winchester Medical Center, as a treatment for epilepsy. Decreased inflammation, aches and pains in your joints will go away. Enhanced sleep. Thank you. I don't want to bore you with optimal ketosis and exercise. That can be another lecture for another day. And so a sample food pyramid. Some fibrous fruits, some nuts, some non-starchy veggies, some healthy fats here, some cheeses and eggs, and some meat options. You know, eggs are really unlimited. They're really nature's perfect food. Dairy you don't want to overdo. There's a lot of hormones and things and sugars that can throw you off. Nuts have sugar, so you have to be careful. You don't want to overdo the nuts either. Salads and veggies. Again, another lecture could be into the oxalates, the histamines, and the nightshades and how they create an inflammatory response. And then fruit sparingly. When you are running on fat, it's called fat adaptation. From your sugar tanks to your glycogen tanks, you only get about 2,000 calories. When you're running on fat, you can get 40,000 calories. So there, I think I may have shared some of this story. Fella in the Army just broke the 100-mile race record by an hour, and he ate 2 hard-boiled eggs doing it. No carb loading for him. So next slide. Salt, you'll need it if you're following a plan like this because you will be in a state of diuresis, meaning you'll be going to the bathroom, you'll be peeing a little bit more. And if any of you ever played high school football and college balls and things, they would give you those salt tablets because as you sweat, you lose salt. Well, when you're on this type of a plan, you pee a whole lot and your kidneys are flushing your salt, so you need to replace your salt. Potassium and magnesium are nice ideas too, and some bone drippings are a great place to get magnesium. Next slide. Microbiome, again, another lecture for another day. Your bacteria really outnumber you 10 to 1. So for every 1 cell you have about 10 bacteria. And this bacteria make your vitamins and they make your hormones. So if you want to boost estrogen levels or boost testosterone levels, you need to fix your germs. And how do we destroy them? We destroy them with antibiotics and steroids and antacids and public tap water. 70,000 chemicals are approved in public water. How does that affect us? We're not really sure. So, and then again, fasting, you guys can refer back to that previous lecture. And good. Just some testimonies I've included. Again, this is hard to see, but a fella came to me, his triglycerides were well over 2,000. He hadn't been able to lower it, and then within a matter of 3 weeks, I got his triglyceride down to 150. And for most of his adult life, it hadn't been below 500. 40-year-old man, maybe 10 pounds overweight, nothing major. But we lowered his cholesterol in 3 weeks. He's now 3 years on the plan. He's off all medication and maintaining a healthy weight and no cholesterol issues. Just some fun folks that have had success. Go ahead. This gal, I love this one because how she looked in the face is really how she felt. Sad and tired and depressed and worn out. Postmenopausal woman. 47 pounds in 4 months. New lady. Young, happy, vibrant, hands on her hips, sassy. I love it. Next slide. 70 pounds in 7 months. Good. These are folks who are progressing and well on their way. She's now down 130 pounds in 13 months. And what I love here, she's wanted her whole life to do ziplining. Finally met the weight requirement to do a zip line. Changed her whole life. So, and she's still progressing. So some books. Again, I think these slides will be available on the SharePoint. But some of my favorites. Dr. Eric Westman is from Duke University, and he is coming to town March 24th. So Dr. Pavel Klein is coming from NIH, and again, a group from South Africa is coming over to Shenandoah University on March 24th to present. If you're all free, I invite you to come. I think they're charging 20 or 25 bucks or something, but it'll be an amazing time in Winchester to hear from these experts, to ask questions, to meet and greet. And is there another slide? I think just some references, yeah. Any particular questions at this time? Comments, concerns? It's about trying to balance your macros a little bit, cut your sugars and starches for the next 8 weeks, and have a testimony, right? Any motivation, any excitement here? You guys are falling asleep here. Any questions? No? Major, you want to share something about some running tips and techniques?
Sure. I was lucky enough about 20 years ago to be introduced to a low sugar diet, and it worked for me and it's been great. So I've kind of stuck with it no matter what I've heard otherwise from the running industry or the food industry. So that was all luck, I think, really. But it's worked for me, and I'm so happy to see the word finally getting out more mainstream from Captain Shoemaker, Dr. Cucuzella, who's also another medical professional locally, who I've been running with and enjoying life with for the last 10 or so years. But it's hard to take this and say, but everywhere I go, they're telling me something different, you know, and I'm telling you, it works. I think the easiest way I learned to explain it to myself is, I think in the last probably 48 hours, I've had about 3 or 4 grams of sugar or carbs or whatever you want to call it, basically bad stuff. So now I'm here standing and breathing and just sitting, and I'm burning calories, and I know those calories are not coming from sugar burning or carb burning, and most likely not protein. So I'm burning fat like all the time, sleeping, eating, running, and you can run a good fast pace not burning sugar the whole time. You do need some sugar to do it. And I've learned a lot of this from Mark over time. You know, how can this happen? And he explains it to me in the doctor's, you know, verbiage. But for me, it's simply, hey, if I'm not eating sugar and I'm running well, guess what I'm using? Fat. You know, and it's a very efficient fuel. You need very little fat, and you can run for, and I've always say this to people and they laugh at me. I say, you can run probably 2 or 3 days on what you've already eaten in the last, you know, couple weeks. You don't have to add power bars and gels and everything else. So it's, like I said, it's really exciting to have Captain Shoemaker putting this stuff out there, and hopefully you guys will share it and it will get around more and more, and I won't have to try to explain in her awesome way of how it works. It's really simple. But like I said, I was lucky enough to learn this a long time ago, and the way I look at it is I just deny my body sugar. And I'm attacking not running fast or running better or anything. I'm attacking being healthy from 2 directions. The most optimal direction is, number 1, is nutrition. Like 80% of my health I know is what I eat. The other 20% is movement. Do I move enough per day to, you know, to keep moving the next day, and on and on and on. So I'm attacking it with the diet first. 80% of my running or my food is, or I just deny my body sugar, so I've got 80% of the solution. Now the other 20% is I do the same way as I train to burn fat for fuel. And I can kind of talk a little more about that than this, but what she mentioned earlier, I want to kind of point out first is anytime you have stress, you don't perform as well, whether it's the insulin thing or whatever. I keep it real simple. So I eliminate a lot of the stress when I exercise or when I train for an event by, I don't wear all the gadgets, I don't count miles, I don't stress over, hey, I was supposed to run 5 miles today and I only ran 4.75, okay? Because my wife does that all the time. It drives me crazy. So eliminating a big part of the stress is my topic that I can cover right. It's very simple. It's run for time and not mileage. What I mean is I'm going to run about how long on a perfect day at a aerobic heart rate, which I'll talk about next, is at what would be about 5 miles. So on a perfect day, maybe I run a 10-minute pace. That's 50 minutes. Well, maybe I go out and it's 95 degrees. Well, I'm going to run for 50 minutes. I may not cover 5 miles, but I did 5 miles worth of heart rate training, and I didn't run too fast. I didn't overheat. I basically, you hydrate when you're thirsty, drink some water. Again, keep it real simple, less stress. Don't say I need 5 ounces every 4.6 minutes. And again, I would go crazy if I had to do all that. So 50-minute run, I did my 5 miles, so I run out for 25 minutes, come back. No stress, very simple. The aerobic heart rate part is, again, I'm attacking my health, not my speed or anything else, from 2 directions. I get the nutrition part covered. Now I want to be a fat-burning runner, right? So Dr. Phil Maffetone, many years ago, I read his books, and it gives you a lot of guidelines on this, but it basically gives you an aerobic heart rate that when you run at this heart rate for a period of time, usually takes 3 to 6 months, 90-something% of your running at this heart rate, and again, I use time to do that, your muscles will change, the mitochondria, everything, there's some real good technical explanations for this, but they will change to quit burning sugar for fuel, and the muscle will change and adapt to burn more fat for fuel. And so I'm attacking it from that side, the physiological side, by running 95% of my running over 3 or 4 months at or below this heart rate. Now all my muscles are changing to burn fat for fuel. All I'm feeding it is fat for fuel. So now, instead of running 2 or 3 days on 3 days worth, I could probably go a week if I could take that much time off and do that. But that kind of simplifies it and gets rid of some of the stress. So in your training plan, if you want to talk to me on your own, what should I do for a 5K or a 1.5 miles or a marathon or a 50-mile run? It works for all of them, and even for old people, works for young people. That's the beauty of the heart rate thing. It adapts to your age. There might be a couple little changes over time, but it always adjusts for, am I running on hills? Am I running in Phoenix, Arizona? Because I travel a lot. Am I running in Anchorage, Alaska, or somewhere where, up north now where it's, -7 outside? Your heart and your body adjust to that. And so if I'm running for time, I may run a different distance each time for that 5-mile run based on the environment I'm running in or my stress level, which affects your heart rate. But I'm getting my 5 miles worth of workout. Keeps you from overtraining, keeps you from undertraining. And I've been using it for a long time. Dr. Cucuzella has been using it for a long time. And the proof is there, it works. If you want to use the gadgets and stuff, that's great. If you want to track mileage, that's great. But I would say if you try the time thing, you'll probably enjoy it more. It's just a lot less stressful. And you can eliminate any stress. Your performance is always better. And then basically your health is going to be better. And as a byproduct, if you want to run your PT test faster, that's a byproduct of being more healthy. And that's the way I like it. My health is really been great since I've been doing this for a while. And like I said, the byproduct is you end up being a little bit lighter and also going a little bit faster because you're more efficient. The fat burning for, I'd say anything over a 5K run is more important than the sugar burning. Another side note I'm learning stuff every day. That's why I come to see Jacqueline and I work with Mark a lot still. I learn something every seminar or expo that I go to. As soon as they get past the carbo loading stuff, then I can see all the other stuff. Is if you spike your sugar, like say you're getting ready to go, well, I guess I don't know how it works for a sugar burning sprinter or runner, but I know for me and for many endurance runners, if you spike your sugar within 30 minutes, maybe for me it's within an hour of a race or an event, when your sugar jumps up, your blood sugar, it shuts off fat burning. And I learned that the hard way because at some point I had adapted just fat burning 95% of my energy. And then like 30 minutes before, everybody's taking a gel or something, getting ready for this bike race. And I do mine, and like the first hour, I could hardly pedal the bike. And that's what I learned what it was the sugar spikes, fat burning shuts off until the blood sugar comes back to a normal level, and then I started fat burning again, and I felt fine. So that's a warning about, drinking a Coke or people do all different things just before their PT test or 5K or whatever. I can't do that. It's about 2 hours prior. I can have a little bit of sugar, like maybe a couple bites of an apple. But racing is different from training. Training, I've trained with very little sugar, and I would recommend that. And your body, again, gets used to that. If you're in a race or, PT test, it's kind of short, but a longer rate event, you do need to take in some sugar over time, every 30, 45 minutes, because it does take sugar. I learned from smarter people than me. It does take a little bit of sugar to burn fat as you're racing, like at that high stress level for a long period of time. So I guess the point, again, the time, run for time instead of mileage. It's a great, easy stress reliever if you want to try that. Any questions on anything I covered?
So what do you eat?
Last night I had avocados wrapped with bacon, broiled in the oven with a big piece of salmon with butter all over everything. So if you like that kind of food, This is a great, I hate calling it a diet. It's denying my body sugar. And then I learned about the corn and the bread part maybe about 8 or 9 years ago when somebody was explaining to me what low-fat peanut butter was. It's like, well, they take peanut butter and they add sugar and it makes more peanut butter and the fat content looks lower, but it's just because it has more sugar in it. And I said, wow, that doesn't sound right. And I'm trying to I don't like sugar. I moved sugar off my diet a long time ago. And then over time, your senses are different. If there's a little bit of sugar in something, you taste it. You become very sensitive to sugar. So you don't like the sweeter things anymore. I mean, you could have, if you're running like a 50K and at the turnaround, they have some Coca-Cola sitting there and you drink a couple sips, you're going to run really well because you haven't had Coca-Cola in like 3 years or something, right? So it's going to give you that boost, but you'll have to draw back a little bit also and go right back to fat burning. So I wouldn't recommend that. But you become very sensitive to the sweetness of things and you can use less and less of, like for dessert now, a lot of times I'll have whipped cream, whipped cream has very little sugar in it, and I'll just put nuts and some really dark chocolate syrup on it. And that is, to me, tastes like ice cream used to taste with chocolate on it and nuts. And it's very low carb, maybe 2 or 3 grams of carbs and a big thing of whipped cream. And you can make your own. It's actually, you just whip heavy cream. I was like, wow, that's how easy it is. But you could add a little would you say the sweeteners? Stevia or whatever, and it sweetens up like just a little bit, and you're like, whoa, once you get to that level where you are sensitive to sugar, tastes great. It's good or better than ice cream used to taste. Any other questions? It's a great question. It's not a diet. It's hey man, if it looks good and it's not packaged or bread, and it's a vegetable or meat, eat a little bit of fruit. I eat. You can almost eat as much as you want because you fill up pretty quick, and you eat breakfast, and a lot of times you're not hungry till like the next day because it's very satiating. Keeps you from being hungry for a long time. You don't have to eat, like if I wanted to go out running or go do a big exercise, you don't have to worry, well, I hadn't eaten in 4 hours. It's like, well, am I hungry? And if I'm not, I'm like, well, I can go do whatever I want. Just make sure I have water. Because I'm using fat. And I have plenty of fat on my body. Probably about 15%, 18%. And that's, like I said, 2 days probably running. Any other questions? It's easy. Takes time though, patience. Thank you.